Today in geometry we're going to deal with our very last section of the year, 12.2 and 12.3, which have to do with arcs and chords and inscribed angles. So really this section is a lot of vocabulary, and also a lot of this has to do with what can you apply to circles based on what you already know about them. So let's take a look at some of the vocab. So first of all, a tangent is a line that intersects the circle at exactly one point. So I made this red here, but you can see this point right here is where it hits. That point is the tangent. Now, realize that that would have to be perpendicular to the center. So if this were my center, I would have some kind of line that I could draw where you could tell where that tangent was at. There would be a 90-degree angle there. Okay, a chord is a segment whose endpoints are on the line that actually makes our circle. And when you have a chord like this, they're all segments. So like they wrote it as PQ. Okay, now this is really a list of all the things that are true within a circle if they're congruent. So you have central angles. We'll have congruent central angles. We'll have congruent chords. Congruent chords make congruent arcs. Congruent arcs will have congruent central angles. You'll kind of notice there's a lot of, things that get used over and over in here. That's kind of important. Chords that are the same distance away from the center have to be congruent. And congruent chords are equidistant from the center. These are kind of opposites of each other. So let's take a look at how this really works. So they tell us in this one, in the following diagram, circle P is congruent to circle O. Now they call it circle P because it has a center point of P. Circle O has a center point of O. It says given that you know that BC and DF are congruent. Now that means that you have congruent chords. So if I have congruent chords, then that means that the arc, I have a arc that's congruent, then the chords are going to have to be congruent. So that means that if these arcs are congruent, that means segment BC is going to have to be congruent to DF. Because we're saying that if you have congruent chords, then arcs are going to have to go together. So you can see that these kind of work together. Okay, because these are arcs. Now, that also means that if I have congruent arcs, I also have central angles that are congruent, which means that angle O, which is this angle in here, is going to have to be congruent to angle P, which is in here. Now, if it were me, I'd probably give a few more letters. I would do, angle BOC is congruent to angle DPF. That's how you'll probably see most people write it. Okay, now, this is a piece that you're going to see something like on the exam. They want us to find the value of A. Now, on this one, a big piece of information for us is that these chords, PR and RT, are both the same distance from the center. That means that PQ is going to have to give us some information. Now, first of all, PQ and QR have to be the same length, so these are both the same. They both have to be 12.5. So if you were to take the segment for PQ and for QR, that would give you the length for PR, which means basically that 12.5 plus 12.5 is going to give you 25. So that means that PR is going to be 25 long. Now, we also know because we said PR is 9 away from the center, so is A. So that means A is going to have to equal whatever PR is, which means it's going to have to equal 25. So A is going to be 25. Okay, now an inscribed angle is an angle whose vertex is on the circle. So you'll notice that an inscribed angle, this angle B, isn't at the center. B is actually on the circle itself. So that means ABC, that angle would have to be inscribed. So an intercepted arc is an arc that's created from this inscribed angle. So I could see ABC is the inscribed angle. That means that AC here is the intercepted arc. So if I know what angle B is here, if I cut it in half, that's going to be what AC is out here. Now we're actually going to use that formula to solve one problem, so you get the idea of how this works. So here is my problem that's up here. And they want us to find both A and B. So I'm going to make a little answer key over here. And actually, probably the one that is the easiest for us to do is A. On this one, the inscribed angle would be 60, which means A would have to be double that. So to find A, I would have to double 60, which means A would have to be 120. Okay, now, to find B. B is kind of a interesting one, because that means it includes all of this. So out here, you know A is 120. And you know there's a piece down here which is 30. So that means that together, that's going to have to be 150. So that means that if the arc PTS, let me actually put the 3 letters. So PTS, that arc is 150. That means that angle B is going to be half of that. So that means angle B is going to be 75 degrees.